Hello, this is Daniel Raymond, the voice behind Ray's Guide. Recently, somebody on Spectrum asked for a less technical explanation of server meshing, and I thought that would be an interesting and potentially popular video to make. But instead, I reframed the concept as explaining server meshing from the player's perspective, which is likely what the requester on Spectrum was actually asking for. I considered for a moment writing it from the standpoint of Ray, my in-game character, but if done right, it will be utterly invisible from the character perspective, except possibly, "Dang, this place got really crowded all of a sudden." So let's start with something that could theoretically be eliminated with server meshing, but which almost certainly will not be. And that is there being separate regions for Europe, North America, and Asia. And the reason is ping. Ping, which comes from an old network diagnostic utility of the same name, is simply the round-trip time for a packet of information to get from your computer to a particular location on the internet and then back to your computer. Even if the server could process and reply to the packet of information instantly, the response time would still be the ping time. And the ping time is not the same from everywhere to everywhere. The more routers and hubs and trunks the signal has to go through, the longer the ping time will be. This webpage, cloudping.cloud/AWS, shows the ping from my computer to each of the Amazon Web Services EC2 data centers. And you can look at it and guess, quite correctly, the general location in the world where I live. And you can see most of North America has good ping times for me as well, but way behind Europe and then further behind most of Asia. But as you no doubt guessed, that's just here. Run this web page in Hong Kong, and it will likely be completely the opposite. So the main technical reasons that online games have regional servers is so that nobody's server response is handicapped with an unreasonably long ping. So while server meshing could get rid of geographic game regions, it raises the question of which Amazon data center is the primary host of it. Because whichever you choose, the other two will be disadvantaged, even after taking measures to mitigate that disadvantage. So, which 2/3 of the world do you want to make really angry at you? I wouldn't want to have to make that choice either. Besides, there are secondary advantages, such as a player base more likely to share common languages and cultural framework, and it makes it easier to schedule events and maintenance at slow times. Next, I need to clarify exactly what is the server we are talking about meshing, because in computing, server is a word that has both hardware and software definitions, and they are often used confusingly interchangeably. For example, if I were to talk about your email server, am I talking about the SMTP process running on an internet address somewhere, or the computer that it is running on? For many people, the word server conjures up an image of a powerful computer, or perhaps racks of them, in a facility called a server farm, even though nobody works there calls themselves server farmers. But that is not what server meshing is about. There are technologies, such as clustering and virtualization, that get those rooms of server computers to work collaboratively together, but that is not what server meshing in Star Citizen is about. Meshing is about software servers. And in software, a server is a program that performs a defined set of tasks as a service, either to applications that people use or to other servers. The whole of computing software can be divided between applications that people use and services which perform roles for those applications and for each other. And chief among these for the discussion of server meshing is what is called the game server. And the game server frankly performs a role very analogous to the game master in a pen and paper role-playing game. They present the world to the players, listen to what the players say they are doing, adjudicate the results, and present the results to the players. Except that while the game master usually is just one person, the game server has dozens of assistant servers who track and calculate various things. For example, there might be a separate service for taking care of your UEC credits, your inventory, how your character has been customized, your ship loadouts, your reputation, your credentials, the inventory at various shops, AI behavior, and on and on. Having all these things handled by other servers helps with modularity and with persistence between the servers. Collectively, the CIG servers that the Star Citizen application running on your computer directly work with, the game server, chat server, VoIP server, etc., are called front-end servers. The CIG servers that the game server relies on are called the back-end servers. Finally, there's a set of services called core services, which are provided to the backend by Amazon Web Services and for which CIG has no ability or likely desire to modify. But is all software services. When your game server crashes, nobody has to get up from their desk at an Amazon data center and run over and push a button on a computer somewhere. It is a software crash only. So, server meshing has to do with meshing the game servers, although the back-end services will play such a large role in it that server meshing might be regarded as a back-end technology. At this point, I should take a moment to mention that I am not a CIG employee and have not been read into the details of how CIG is creating server meshing. Thus, I will likely be wrong when those details are inevitably made public. So regard this as a conceptual overview and not a technical brief. Server meshing really starts with a simple perpetual issue. How do you make a massively multiplayer game massive? One standard method has been with levels, although different games might call them maps, zones, neighborhoods, regions, whatever. With that old school human game master, they would flip to a new page in their binder and set up a new level on the tabletop. Comparably, with a computer game, there would be some sort of door, portal, elevator, whatever, and a loading screen. But right from the get-go, CIG said that loading screens are immersion-breaking and there would be none of them in Star Citizen. Yay! So instead, CIG has relied on a technology called instancing. In other words, it's like there are 50 chairs around the table, and that is not enough. They make another table with 50 chairs around it and another game master. But both game masters would use the same back-end services so that, for example, it would be easy to ensure that if you earned money in one game, it would still be yours in the next. Recently, Chris Roberts said that at peak server loads, they were topping at about 30,000 users, maybe more now. So that would mean 600 tables of 50. CIG then set about the next task of bringing the massive, and they was to start adding to the world. New planets, new moons, an asteroid belt, and more locations. Plus technologies like object container streaming that made it possible for the world to be so huge. But the table still had just 50 chairs around it. So what seemed like a very vibrant and active place when it was just Port Olisar and a few other locations now became very sparse. It's typically rather rare to see other players in an average game session unless you're trying to get together. What to do? Well, one possibility would be to put in 4 game masters at each table, 1 for each planet, and put 4 times the number of chairs around the table, and then quietly hand off the player from one to the next while they were in quantum travel. That would be static server meshing. And anybody who knows human nature, much less gamer nature, will immediately see why it would be an utter disaster. Because soon as it would be possible to say, hey, let's all get together at Orison, that is exactly what everyone would do, and overwhelm the Orison game server. Still, the first Tier 0 implementation will likely be a static division between Stanton and Pyro, with your chair being moved from one of the Stanton tables to one of the Pyro tables while in the jump tunnel. Doesn't that just make the jump tunnel a sophisticated form of loading screen? Well, sort of, but not as massive and non-interactive, one hopes. And it does mean that adding Pyro will not make Stanton even more sparsely populated. But Stanton will still be sparsely populated, and so will Pyro. It also means that the number of servers for each of the 2 planets will match the user demand for them. There might be some other Tier 0 static, such as, for example, Klesher Prison, but the real goal is to have dynamic server meshing that can react to the movement of the players. And that is what I will spend the rest of the time talking about. So let's go back to that example of lots and lots of folks wanting to go to Orison all at once. How can you react? Well, you could split a game server from Crusader and give it authority over just Orison. And if still more people arrive at Orison, you can split off separate game servers for Providence Platform, Cloudview Center, and the Dunlo Spaceport. Then if folks all start arriving at Cloudview, perhaps a game server just for Green Circle, or one just for the TDD, the Stratus Center, the Voyager Bar, or if dozens of people all come to the 20th floor of Green Circle, a server just for the 20th floor. And finally, if they all decide to clown car into my hab, a game server just for my hab. But while that might be quite scalable, it is not infinitely scalable. Creating 2 game servers for the door and bed halves of my half will likely be pointless because they would have to spend so much time communicating with each other about what's going on in the other half of the room to eliminate any benefit of having 2 servers. So yes, it will be possible with server meshing to load a server to its knees by crowding people together. But hopefully it will only affect those clowns in that clown car. So the first thing you might be thinking right now is that server meshing will require a huge technical challenge to break off and spawn these separate game servers when needed, to consolidate them when they are not needed, and to smoothly transfer players from one to another. Remember, no loading screens. But that's just the half of it. Let's go to that 20th floor and walk to the balcony and talk about how complicated this is in another way. And let's presume that we are at that party going on this floor, or at least in Green Circle, and we've been given our own game server in the mesh. That means that everything I see out of the windows is being managed by some other game server. So let's presume that big freight ship there is actually an 890 jump. That ship is actually on a different game server. So somehow that game server has to tell our server where the 890 jump is being piloted to, and our game server has to tell that server with the 890 jump in it that if someone there were to look over here, that there are people on the balcony of this floor. Or if we look over there, there's the shuttle to Providence platform, which is currently informing our server where it is and the people that are on it. But as it gets within visual range of Providence, we'll need to stop coordinating with the servers here and start coordinating with the game servers covering Providence. The most likely way all this will get accomplished is by some sort of huge back-end process where we're all reporting everything going on our local servers, and some sort of back-end process based on size and distance informs each of the other servers of the extra things that they have to render to their users. That's a lot of work. And if I look over there by the space whale sculpture, I see a tiny person who, based on their illogical movements, I can only presume is a player, who, in a busy server-meshed reality, is on a different server communicating through the back end every one of his erratic movements to my game server, and I must presume that if they will look this way, they will see a guy on a balcony. And I ask, if I had a gun with a high-power scope, will I be able to shoot him? Conversely, will he be able to shoot me? Before you say obviously yes, consider that all that coordination through the back end is going to take time, perhaps several hundred milliseconds easily. Now, if the gameplay is, there's my bounty, quick, go to the elevator and go down there and capture them, then the fact that I am seeing where they were 3/4 of a second ago is irrelevant. If instead the gameplay is, there's my bounty, get my sniper rifle, then the fact that I am seeing where they were 3/4 of a second ago is game-breaking lag. So expect that at least at early tiers of development, the only way to attack across-mesh servers will be gross area effect weapons like bombs and rockets, which would likely have quite unfortunate collateral damage results. So if I do take off on the chase and go to the elevator and this floor is in its own game server, then somewhere on the trip down, through some sort of back-end server, the game will have to hand my character off to whatever server is handling the lobby, which still might not be the one handling the plaza where the space whale sculpture is, requiring even more handoffs by the time I get there. What I hope this really impresses you is that the full implementation of dynamic server meshing will be truly revolutionary, both in terms of having a much more lively, dynamic, and densely populated world, but also in something really never having been done before, having game servers communicate through the back end so that one can see the other. Having game servers be completely isolated is something that has been a hard rule from the start of multiplayer online games. I hope this is making you much more appreciative of how massive a challenge the full dynamic server meshing implementation will be. Finally, of course, an update on the ship giveaway. As of recording, we are at 58% of the watch hour goal to trigger the award of the winner's choice of either the RSI Scorpions or the Gaytac Raelian. 1 entry per video. Just be a subscriber and comment using the secret word. And the secret word for this video is actually 2 words. I want you to go to the website I mentioned earlier, find out which Amazon AWS server has the lowest ping for you, and what that ping is. It'll be kind of a way of doing a little survey of where everybody's from without giving away personal information. Fly safe, keep it real, and I'll see you in the verse. This is Daniel Raymond for Ray's Guide.